warm welcome to you today. Everyone is welcome here. This community is a safe place where we support each other in the sacred task of becoming. Our goal is increased consciousness so that we can live our greatest possible being and participate in society with love, compassion, and justice. In this congregation, we have faith in the inherent worth and dignity of all people, believe we are part of the interdependent web of existence, celebrate the transcending mystery of life, and rely on the transforming power of love. Everyone is welcome here, regardless of their politics, criminal records, religious proclivities, gender identity, who they love, or if they are unsure of any or all of the above categories. You are human, and we are glad you zoomed in here today. And now Tom Hackley has something for us.
So I may continue in the tradition of Marvin Fuller here and start crying in the middle of what I have to say. That I think is time honored at Buff, so I'll just proceed. When I last attended a Buff service, I was an ardent environmentalist. I believed that climate change was a serious problem for the planet. But I'm a different person now than I was 2 years ago. Here's why. Last August, after a sobering Come to Jesus presentation about the climate emergency by a member of People's Church, we took stock and tried to figure out what to do about it. At breakfast with our oldest granddaughter before her return to college, we talked about this. Hannah told us that many of her friends were deciding not to have children because the future looks so bleak. And she said, "Grandpa, if you want to do something about the climate change, you should eat only plant-based food." Well, I knew she was right, but until that moment, it was only an action that I might take sometime in the future. I hesitated and then promised her that I would join her in being vegan. This was a turning point for me. I had viewed environmentalism and climate change as subjects of interest to be studied, discussed, mulled over, analyzed. But I suddenly found myself knowing in my heart that this was real and drastic and happening now, and we need to act now. So I want to give you some concrete things that we must do individually and collectively as members of the first world in order to stop climate change and heal the earth for all. How do we make America great again and save the planet? Here's the top 6 countdown. The number 6 way to make America great again and save the planet is call your congressman. You know who I'm talking about. Combating climate change cannot be done by individual actions alone. Governments at all levels need to be aggressive about reversing the ever upward flow of greenhouse gases. And don't stand for the usual pablum about bipartisanship and co-sponsored bills, blah, 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 with no details. Make your representatives declare themselves. And if they don't come up to snuff, vote them out. Number 5, change your diet. The average American's diet puts 2.5 metric tons of carbon into the atmosphere each year, more than 2.5 times as much as a vegan diet. Much of this comes from the raising of red meat on industrial farms, fed by grain grown in intentionally burned and denuded rainforests. Number 4, stop consuming so much stuff. The average American has a carbon footprint of over 28 metric tons of carbon equivalent a year, while the average Chinese person's is 3.4 tons. Yes, we, you and I, are the 1%. No pointing fingers. We're the ones. So many things to do to reduce your footprint. less driving and flying, more sane Christmas giving. Turn off your buy it now option at Amazon and hit pause. Slow down your life and your driving speed. Live in the moment and drink in all the beauty that is yours for nothing. The list goes on. Number 3, go solar and shut off the gas. Every time you run your air conditioner, clothes dryer, or furnace, you're putting greenhouse gases into the air and supporting the fossil fuel industry, encouraging them to drill, dig, strip, frack, and burn in a way that devastates the environment, mostly in a marginalized person's backyard. If solar doesn't work for your home, you can buy renewable energy credits from a company like Arcadia Power to displace the energy you use, but get off the carbon diet. Number 2, plant trees, lots of them. Trees are our planet's lungs. 1 is good, 8 billion is better. You can get a lot of mileage by finding a favorite NGO like 8billiontrees.com or the Arbor Day Foundation. For $1 or $2, they'll put a tree in the ground for you in a place that is feeling rapid deforestation, loss of habitat, and species extinction. Try making this part of your Christmas shopping and give your whole family a better future without consuming anything. Trees eat carbon and give back oxygen. They cool the earth by evaporation from their leaves and by shading the ground, and they provide habitat for hundreds of species, not the least of which are endangered pollinators. And now, the number 1 way to make America great again and save the planet: listen to your grandchildren. They know more than you. They are the ones who will have to live in the future we leave them. And they have not become jaded or discouraged or co-opted or blasé. They speak in sentences without the words but or on the other hand. They truly get it. Join them at the rallies. Stand with them on the ramparts. Eat vegan meals together and give them gifts from your heart that will make their world a better place. They're our legacy. Let's not blow it. As one speaker at last week's All Michigan UU service said, our worship is over. May our service begin.
Amen, Tom. Thank you for that very passionate and practical talk.
When Jim asked me to talk about reclaiming patriotism, one of the first things I did was to talk to a number of friends of mine. And I talked to a friend in Colorado who I know has pretty much given up on this country. And he was telling me he no longer will even so much as stand for the national anthem or do the pledge or fly the flag or anything. And then I talked to another friend who said that after 9/11, our country's response to that, she gave up on patriotism and doesn't want anything to do with it. And then I talked to another person who said, even though she understands the darkness of our history and the major problems we have now, she still can also see the good and still gets chills when she hears patriotic music. So I began to think, what actually is patriotic? What is patriotism? Is it patriotic to join the military? Well, yes, of course, it is. What about marching against wars? I think marching and protesting against wars maybe started in a big way with Vietnam, and it's continued every time there's been Afghanistan or Iran. And I think that's another sign of patriotism. Standing with your hand over your heart, singing the national anthem, that's patriotism. But also kneeling and protesting against police brutality, even if it's during the time of the national anthem, that's patriotic too. What about praising our country and never finding fault, which is the position of many people? And I think that's not patriotism. Criticizing in an effort to bring positive change, I think, is patriotism. People can love their country and still know that it is not better than many other countries in the world. I can praise the efforts and accomplishments and at the same time be critical when there's a need for improvement. One of my favorite all-time old hymns speaks to that better than I can. So I'm gonna read a couple verses here. This is called, and many of you will remember this, I'm sure. It's called "This Is My Song." This is my song, O God of all the nations, a song of peace for lands far away and mine. This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. Oh, hear my song, thou God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine. I believe to move forward in our country in a positive way, we need to work on joining that solid middle core of political spectrum and spread out to the middle right and the middle left. The far right often sees patriotism when they look backward and long for the way things used to be. Their positions are often based on fear of change, which is often expressed in anger. Those of us who see our country as in need of great change, yet love it for what it can be and what we want it to be, we choose to look to hope. So what happens if we abdicate patriotism to those on the right? I believe we will eventually lose all the way around. This great American project warrants our best efforts in working toward justice for all, and all men and women are created equal, and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There are a great number of people on both the left and the right who are motivated by a need for national pride embedded in the symbolism of flags and music. I was recently told that if I fly a flag on my house, everyone will think I'm right-wing. My husband and I have never flown a flag in the 38 years we've been married, but now we do fly the flag. While in front of our house along the road, there are yard signs for liberal candidates we support. People may do a double take, but I think that's a good thing. Civic patriotism must be an aspirational story of struggle and inclusion. On the 50th anniversary of the Selma March, President Barack Obama asked, "What greater form of patriotism is there than the belief that America is not yet finished, that we are strong enough to be self-critical, that each succeeding generation can look upon our imperfections and decide what it is in our power to remake the nation to more closely align with our highest ideals." So while we work toward peace and justice, challenging the wrongs of the past and present, I will fly the American flag, sing the national anthem, and work toward achieving the best America we can be. And maybe the highest form of patriotism is the vote. So on November 3rd, let's all either be at the polls or have sent in our ballots.
And let's continue. So the title of this sermon is "Make America Great for Real." It is my opinion that our American society is pretty badly broken. It also seems to me that the COVID pandemic has acted as a kind of magnifying glass, our lens that has revealed some of that brokenness. I'm going to attempt in this brief talk to A, look at some of the reasons why our society has become so dysfunctional, B, suggest an antidote for our brokenness, and C, examine how to administer that antidote to ourselves and our fellow citizens. This is a sermon about hope, though it is not going to sound very hopeful at first. And by way of footnote, when I use the word brokenness, I'm talking about a state of separation, our estrangement from self, our soul, or from the ground of our being, whatever terminology you care to use. End footnote. America is broken. I don't need to rehearse all the statistics that support this thesis. In spite of the fact that we are the richest nation in the world, 40 million of us live in poverty, are below the poverty line, and 11 million American kids suffer from food scarcity. Additionally, we spend more on our military than the rest of the world combined, while our infrastructure crumbles, and we cannot seem to adequately educate many of our kids. Our politics are filled with acrimony and hate. Our police can't seem to stop killing innocent black men, and we are the world's largest hotspot for infection from coronavirus. All the while, white nationalists, accessorizing with assault rifles and swastikas, are protesting the wearing of protective masks because it impinges on their freedoms. Let's look at one of the ways we came to our current state of dysfunction. French philosopher Descartes is considered to be the first philosopher of the modern age. He is famous for developing the idea of dualism, which is the notion that spirit, and you can read mine here, and matter are two separate things. This idea, which no one really believes in anymore, combined with the discoveries of Copernicus, a generation earlier than Descartes, and Galileo, a near contemporary of Descartes, launched the modern age in which we live. With the modern age came the idea that scientific investigation was a superior way of knowing the universe, which it actually is, though only for a very small part of the universe. The old organizing principle that God was actively doing the universe began to fall into disrepute. The new paradigm that arose at that time, about 400 years ago, is a paradigm that many call scientific materialism. Most Americans are thoroughly marinated in scientific materialism. It penetrates our general culture. We see the world through its lens. Scientific materialism is a part of our cultural programming. It is the only religion taught in American schools in every class from physical education to English literature. Scientific materialism is the notion that science will save us and that matter is the only thing that matters, since it is pretty much the only thing that science can be used to investigate. Scientific materialism does not allow for a soul or any idea of a sacred or a holy. If you can't touch it, see it, hear it, smell it, or taste it, it really doesn't exist. It just doesn't matter. In scientific materialism, you and I are nothing but objects, pieces of meat that happen to have accidentally evolved to be conscious of our lives, which really have no meaning beyond that which we pretend to give them. Consequently, in the 400 years since Descartes, our species has become progressively more and more separated from our souls, our essential selves. Many of us are badly broken. Together, we have made a broken society, and we are on the pathway of breaking our planet. And by way of footnote, science is a great tool. I love science. My undergraduate degree is in engineering. I feel a sense of wonder and awe when I view pictures from the Hubble telescope. I am thankful for the miracle drugs that have kept me alive through 25 years of heart disease and cured me from a cancer I had a few years back. I doubt that humanity will ever become post-scientific. However, science cannot get us out of the current mess we are in as a species. Science cannot save us. Science may prolong our lives, let us live like kings, or create a 100% efficient solar panel. It cannot, however, help us to find the truth of our existence. Science cannot guide us to joy and purpose. Science, once again, is a tool, a very useful tool, but just a tool. The only thing that can ever save us as individuals and as a society is communion with the ground of our being. And by way of a second footnote, the notion that only matter matters easily transmogrifies into the kind of unfettered killer capitalism that is currently responsible for endangering our democracy by creating huge imbalances of power. The wealthy, people that matter, end up with most of the matter and most of the political power. Capitalism is a wonderful tool for creating wealth. It is, however, a very poor God. End of footnotes. Interestingly, actual science is playing the funeral dirge for scientific materialism. Last century, a big monkey wrench was thrown into the cause of scientific materialism with the advent of quantum mechanics, which such things as quantum entanglement, which seem to indicate that we really are all connected, and the strange fact that observation collapses wave function and creates particles from waves of something that is pretty close to nothing, the universe is beginning to look pretty darned weird. The old paradigm of scientific materialism circling the drain. What will replace it? What is replacing it. A basic assumption of scientific materialism is that mind, our spirit, is an epiphenomenon of brain. Yet physicists like James Jean, Nobel laureate Erwin Schrödinger, and Nobel laureate Max Planck have suggested that it is the other way around. Mind is a matrix of matter. In other words, the universe is an activity of consciousness, something with which the Buddha and many of the mystics of the West would be in agreement. It looks like the universe just got holy again, and along with it, you and me. And since you and I are consciousness-bearing beings capable of loving, it looks like we may be co-creators of the whole shebang. Something which, again, the mystics of the great religions have known for millennia. We are not passive experiencers of life. We are creators of life. We have the power as consciousness-bearing beings to change the world. You have heard me say many times from this pulpit that the willingness to give attention to or to be conscious of is another name for love. Love is the antidote for brokenness for which we have been looking. So how then do we apply the antidote of love to our broken lives and our broken society? You know what really gets my goat, fills me with rage, and turns my mind towards hate? People who refuse to wear a mask because it is an attack on their freedoms. This week, when I heard that Brian Kemp, the governor of Georgia, was suing some mayors and other city officials because they had enacted mask-wearing mandates in their cities, I was about 1/16 of an inch away from exploding into rage. Kemp's actions seemed to me to be incompetent, divisive, and bordering on evil. I was sorely tempted to hate. By way of footnote, if anyone here feels compelled to tell me that you never have moments like this when you are tempted to anger or hate over our current political position, I must warn you that I probably won't believe you. This is one boat in which we are all sailing. And by way of another footnote, this is a perfect example of how science cannot save us. The science is just as good in Georgia as it is in the rest of the world. Masks work. As long as the human spirit is subject to evil, and brokenness, no tool, be it science or democracy or technological advance, can save us. Salvation comes only from communion with the ground of being itself. So this is where we can begin to administer the antidote of consciousness/love to our brokenness. We can begin with our own episodes of hate. And if you have never had an episode of hate, you can feel free to shut off your computer because this may not be for you. Step 1, admit you are a hater and part of you enjoys hating. Step 2, when the opportunity to hate arises, as it did for me last week with Brian Kemp, apply love to your hate. Instead of releasing your hate into the environment where it can rampage about and contribute to the general brokenness and your diminishment as a human being, hold on to it for a bit and examine it closely. Keep it in the view of your inner eye. Give it the time and attention that you would to a young child who is distressed from falling and scraping her knee. Step 3, dialogue with your hate. Ask it what it wants. I guarantee you will get a response. The answer you may receive from your hate is that it is easier to feel hate than to feel fear. Your hate might tell you that your fear is close by if you would like to chat. As you shine the light of consciousness on your fear, which is the same as giving it love, you may discover that a transformation is taking place. You might begin to understand that it is a fearsome thing to be human and to bear consciousness. You might even learn to cut yourself and others a little slack. We all screw up, we all lie, we all on occasion fall far, far short of living authentic, loving, conscious lives, and we all occasionally sell our souls, sometimes very cheaply. Step 4, realize that by shining the light of love on your hate and following it to your fears, that you have become a little less broken. The world may appear to you to have more possibility. You actually may be becoming a little bit better person, and you can lovingly work to elect officials who do not lie. All the above is not new. It was what Martin Luther King Jr. meant when he said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." Okay, if we have learned to successfully apply love to ourselves and our brokenness, how do we apply it to our relationships with others? Again, the prescription is not new. Jesus formulated it best over 2,000 years ago when he said, "Love your enemies, bless those that curse you, and pray for those that persecute you." I'm very fortunate to have several people in my life with whom I dialogue frequently, and am in stark disagreement on this very issue of brokenness. Taking the lessons I have learned from applying love to my own brokenness, I'm often able to enter into dialogues that skip the acrimony. To do this, I follow Jesus' prescription. It is hard to tell a person that he or she is a giant, moronic, knuckle-dragging nitwit when you are sending that individual positive thoughts or secretly blessing them. When we bless or pray for one another, we deepen our communion with the sacred creative, the ground of being, which, if we are attentive, will furnish us with loving ways of being with one another and talking about difficult issues. And yes, minds can be changed. It could even be your mind that is changed. Also, don't be surprised when hope shows up and the world begins to seem a little brighter. By way of footnote, love may also call you to the streets, the barricades, or to arms. That topic is, however, another sermon. End of footnote. In this sermon, I have suggested that we are a broken society, that much of why we are broken is because we have made science, which is a very useful tool, into a very bad religion, the very bad religion of scientific materialism. Fortunately, the light of consciousness has started to shine through the cracks of our brokenness. Science itself is now pointing towards consciousness/love as the elemental stuff of the universe. So yes, we can make America great by building on the ancient foundations of love and light. Now let's take a moment to just be quiet. And then when Lisa thinks it's appropriate, she can play our final hymn. Wow. And now for Nan.
As we extinguish our chalice, may our faith sustain us, our hope inspire us, and our love surround us as we go our separate ways, knowing that we will gather again in this beloved community. Blessed be